next thing that happened here, the next development was that there was still no organisation established, and I found it very frustrating. And you'd get a few people together and they'd all talk but not do anything. And finally there was this group that was set up by a couple of prominent Catholic doctors, and anyway they called it the Human Life Society or something like that, and they arranged a few public meetings. One in the Melbourne Town Hall was held in 1970, and the main speaker was the late Professor Sir William Lively, who was a famous New Zealander, and he was known as the father of fetology in the world. He was the leading fetologist.
Fetuses.
Yes, that's right. And he had developed a means of transfusing a baby in the womb. Because in those days, if, say, the mother was Rh negative as I am and the husband's positive, it means that it affects the blood of their children. And they used to call them blue babies, and sometimes those babies would die in utero. And so Professor Sir William Lively developed this means of transfusing them in the womb. If they discovered, using blood tests, and that the child was going to be affected in this way, they would act to save the child's life. And so he was the main speaker, and he was a particularly fine man, and he used to say the only reason that a woman has an abortion today is that mother doesn't want the baby. He used to say,
I would agree.
Give me a woman with a crook heart, rotten diabetes, bad kidneys, horrible psychosis, any one of those conditions, and I'll get her through the pregnancy. And anyway, 2,000 people at the meeting. That's how people cared then. And so anyway, things went from there, and I spoke at a few of these public meetings, which this group, the Human Life Protection Society, I think it's called, had done. And then in 1973, there was this bill in the federal parliament. I, by that stage, had a third child. I had two late in life, and was called the Mackenzie-Lamb Bill. The legislation called for to allow abortions up to 16 weeks of pregnancy in the ACT. And the reason that they were able to do that in the federal parliament is because the federal parliament still has control over certain things that occur in the territories, like the Northern Territory, the ACT, Australian Capital Territory, and I believe Norfolk Island. There was a very strong campaign developed here in Victoria against it, and it was very effective. A huge letter writing was carried out, not just here but in other states. But the strongest impetus came from Victoria, and there were a lot of good Labor members who voted against the legislation. There used to be some good Labor members of Parliament in those days. Unfortunately, there's very few of them now.
So do you personally oppose abortion if the child has a deformity?
Absolutely.
Or they're the result of rape or incest?
Absolutely.
Do you want to explain why? Just to the people watching?
Well, firstly, in relation to deformity, we don't kill a person who has become disabled, a child with Down syndrome who happens to have been born. They weren't killed in those days, but these days 98% of them don't see the light of day because the condition is able to be diagnosed in the womb.
And so, sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes the test is wrong and they abort the baby anyway.
Well, that's right, it can be wrong, but as well as that, it's really practicing eugenics.
It is.
Practicing eugenics.
Did you have many boyfriends before you got married, or were you with the one man your whole life?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Let's get into a bit of your sexual history.
I've always kept my clothes on. But that's the problem today. If they'd only do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They wouldn't need abortion if they just kept their clothes on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, no, it has caused a lot of harm.
It has. Yeah.
And it's very sad when look, there was a woman who a girl had an article in the paper, funnily enough in the Age, and she was like you, saying she wants to be married. She looked attractive, she's a good writer, but
I'm all those things.
She got this problem. You know. Anyway, there we are. Well.
Do you think it's a problem with men as well? Do you think men don't want to take responsibility for a wife and children? And
they don't need to anymore. You know, like they can have it all, and
that's it.
Or they can put it off. You know. But some of them, you know, they are keen to have children. I've got one grandson. He's exclusion zone.
Yeah, the exclusion zones. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think they're so wrong. And it just goes to show that the lengths that people will go to, governments will go to stop any opposition to abortion. And basically, they don't, you notice the rhetoric they use, the politicians, particularly some of these women, so dishonest. You never hear them use the word kill. Never.
Because they don't. Because that's because they've been tricked. They've been tricked to believe
rights,
it's a
women's reproductive health. Tanya Plebiscite. Oh boy, reproductive health, reproductive rights. Bill Shorten, some time ago, he was saying that if the government, if his party was elected, we should be building a women's reproductive health hub in Tasmania. Why? Because they were having to come across here to have the late abortions, and so they were going to build them down there. But it was a women's reproductive health hub. Yeah. Well, we all want good reproductive health, don't we?
Yes, but that because that phrase now consists of abortions, I would not participate in that discussion.
Yes, I know, but I'm saying.
But you're right. We
dishonest rhetoric. The right to choose. Oh, I believe in choice. What are you talking about? We all believe in choice.
Yeah,
but euphemisms. Yeah.
You know, truly.
I wanted to ask you, Margaret.
Yes.
With the exclusion zones, would you say it would be fair to breach the exclusion zones, or just?
Oh yes. But people will have to be prepared to take the penalty. Yeah. They have to be prepared for that.
All right, let's go.
Would you do it? Would you have done it back then if the exclusion zones existed?
We probably would have, because
she was arrested 5 times.
Because I
love my criminal friends.
I know.
But when we have protested, had those, we call them rescues. Yeah. Well, we just refused to move, and the thing is today, and we still invited a penalty, because was trespass. That's usually what it was.
Yeah.
Refusing to move, and so it's no different today. They could get ideally they should get a big crowd of people to go and all sit down in front of say.
That's a good idea.
Should I organise that?
Let's round up the gang.
Well, you would all be arrested. You'd all be like Kathy Club, but then
500 Kathy clubs.
But then
in the presence of greatness,
we can grab clubs.
But then, so that's what they need, a big crowd doing that. A big crowd.
Yeah.
So there we are.
That's where we stand. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you.
Claudia.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I hope it's all right.
I hope you've enjoyed the interview.